You think power is blatant. You think it's loud. You think power belongs to those who shout, dominate, or intimidate overtly. What you haven't seen, what no one tells you, is that the most lethal forms of power are silent, invisible, and buried inside structures of expectation, and once you understand them, you see the rules that everyone else ignores. The psychology of power is not a battle of strength or intellect. It's a battle of prediction, control, and timing. Most people approach life as though honesty, kindness, and rationality shield them from manipulation. They do not. Those traits make you readable, and readable people are moved. Power games begin long before words are spoken. They start in the assumptions made about you, assumptions you broadcast with your facial expressions, body language, emotional reactivity, and reflexive honesty. Those unconscious signals become data. And data is leverage. What does leverage look like? It's not always coercion. It's influence measured without visible force. You do not notice it until you are inside it. Someone suggests an idea, and you adopt it. Someone frames a narrative, and you fill in the gaps. Someone directs a conversation, and you follow their lead without asking why. That is power that hides, and it is far more effective than blunt force. You have been trained to think in explicit terms, speak the truth, say what you mean, communicate openly. But in human systems, social, corporate, political, interpersonal, truth without strategic framing becomes a tool others use against you. You do not lose because you are honest. You lose because your honesty makes you predictable. Predictability is a psychological vulnerability. When someone knows how you will react, they do not need to overwhelm you. They only need to guide you. They do not wrestle you into submission. They redirect you subtly, and by the time you notice the shift, you believe it was your choice. Here is a question most people never ask. If everyone were completely honest, who would have leverage? Would honesty equal power, or would it dissolve into noise? Truth is easy to claim, but truth that cannot be contextualized is meaningless. In power games, meaning is derived not from truth itself, but from how truth is used, withheld, framed, and revealed. Niccolo Machiavelli, whose name carries political dread, did not teach cruelty. He taught awareness of what humans actually do, not what they should do. His observations are not moral prescriptions. They are descriptions of human nature under competition. And underneath every social negotiation, human interaction, and hierarchical shift lie psychological currents most people never consciously see. When you understand these currents, power stops being a struggle and becomes a structure you navigate instead of being pushed through. Power games are hidden because their success relies on invisibility. If someone is obviously trying to control you, your defenses activate. But if someone gains influence through your own assumptions about fairness, cooperation, and rationality, you never see the mechanism until you are inside it. Let me tell you something you should have learned long ago. Humans do not treat people who behave predictably as equals. They treat them as predictable variables to be managed. That sounds harsh. But it is statistical, not moral. If someone enters a space without uncertainty, that person provides no friction. No friction means no need for effort. And when someone requires little effort to understand, other people adjust around them instead of with them. That is where hidden power games begin. Now I am going to teach you how these games operate, the rules nobody tells you, so that you no longer play them unwittingly. To understand the hidden psychology of power games, you must first understand a fundamental truth about humans. People respond first to incentives, not intentions. You tell someone you intend to be fair. They watch your behavior. They do not internalize intention. They internalize patterns. If your behavior matches your stated intention, they feel safety. If your behavior contradicts it, they feel risk. But they always track behavior, not promises. Look at negotiation patterns. A person who says I want fairness may actually be signaling submission. A person who says nothing may actually be asserting boundaries. The very attempt to reassure someone can lower your psychological ground because reassurance often signals fear of disapproval, and fear is the currency of leverage. You have been taught to apologize quickly when things go wrong. That sounds noble. But in negotiation, quick apology signals lower investment in the outcome and higher availability for modification. The strategic individual apologizes only when it is useful, not when it is reflexive. This is not about morality. This is about signal economy, the currency of influence. Power is not taken when the opponent is weak. Power is taken when the opponent believes they understand you. Once someone believes they understand you, your reactions, your boundaries, your logic, they stop negotiating with uncertainty. That is when you become movable. Understanding this transforms how you view influence. Power is not a loud contract. It is a silent expectation. When someone shapes the expectations surrounding you, they shape the world you operate in. Now ask yourself, who benefits from knowing how you will react? Who benefits from your predictability? Answering that reveals where the hidden power games live, and to uncover them fully requires abandoning the naive belief that people are rational. They are not. Rationality is a post hoc explanation, not a driver of behavior. Human behavior is governed by incentives, emotions, and prediction, often far beneath conscious awareness. When someone acts in ways that seem irrational, it is because they are optimizing for a hidden variable: opportunity. Opportunity is not logic. Opportunity is benefit without cost. And humans, left to their own devices, always choose opportunity. Here's the brutal part most people refuse to see. People do not want you to be fully understood. They want you to be useful in predictable ways. Power games operate in the gap between how people talk and how they behave. They exploit belief in rational cooperation while capitalizing on unconscious self-interest. When you assume cooperation, you expose patterns. When others assume competition, they hedge, redirect, and integrate your behavior into their strategy. This is the hidden psychology no one warns you about. You don't lose because you're honest. You lose because your honesty becomes data about you. That data is not neutral. It is exploitable. Listen closely, because soon I will reveal the precise mechanisms hidden beneath casual social interaction, the unconscious moves that decide who leads, who follows, who influences, and who is influenced. For now, reflect on this. Every reaction you have reveals an algorithm about you, and someone somewhere has already been computing it. The first hidden rule of power games is that no one sees them happening while they are happening. Power does not announce itself with loud claims and obvious gestures. It displays itself through reactions, or the absence of reaction. It is the silence after a question that carries weight, not the word spoken. It is the hesitation that reveals uncertainty, not confidence. Those who understand this do not fight with volume. They operate with spacing, the spaces between words, actions, pauses, and expectations. Now consider your own reactions. When someone challenges you, what is your instinct? Do you defend? Do you justify? Do you explain? If so, then your reaction becomes the lever others use to shape your future behavior. Power games exploit the reflexes you assume are authenticity. Reactive honesty is not defense. It is exposure, and exposure builds maps. Human brains are pattern machines. They do not listen first. They watch first. Every predictable reaction you give is a data point in someone else's mental model of you. Once that model grows precise enough, others no longer need confrontation to influence you. They guide you indirectly through environment, suggestion, framing, and expectation. Power games are largely unconscious. People do not think, I will now manipulate this person. Instead, they observe, react, test, and adapt. They adjust behavior based on your output. If you always react with emotion, they shape scenarios toward emotional outcomes. If you always explain, they ask questions until clarity becomes a tool they leverage. Ask yourself this: do people settle disagreements with you quickly, or do they continue pushing until you show emotional patterns? If the latter, then the power dynamic was never balanced. Power games exploit asymmetry, not of strength, but of information. The person who has more information about you controls the litany of possible outcomes. When someone can forecast your reactions, they do not need to dictate your options. They simply present paths that favor their interest and let your predictability guide you into them. This is why emotionally reactive people feel like they lose the moment they choose truth over strategy. It isn't honesty that loses. It's predictability without control that loses. Machiavelli described this principle long ago. The wise prince must appear virtuous, but must in fact behave according to the need of the moment. Masked virtue and controlled exposure are not lies. They are strategic visibility. You do not reveal less because you are insincere. You reveal less because you understand the currency of visibility. Visibility is not the same as transparency. When you broadcast internal states, anxiety, excitement, frustration, you give others handles. A handle is a lever. Once someone finds a lever on you, they can test it repeatedly to see how much force is required to influence your decisions. A lever in your mental architecture that others discover by pattern recognition becomes easier to manipulate than any external resource they could apply. Imagine two individuals in a negotiation. One displays calm, measured responses. The other bursts with emotion. Which one is harder to influence? Not because the calm one is heartless, but because the emotional one hands out their internal responses repeatedly and without calibration. And patterns are easier to exploit than principles. This is the essence of hidden power games. Not control through force, but control through predictive advantage. Once someone can predict your next move, they can pre-frame your choices. They do not have to tell you what to think. They tell you what to choose from. Your choice then feels like freedom, but it is guided. That is what they do not warn you about. Most people treat human interaction as honest exchange of information and intention. This is naive. Human interaction is a constant exchange of behavioral data, some intentional, some involuntary, some unconscious. And the person who understands this data exchange first has the first opportunity to shape it. Consider how often people ask you questions not because they need information, but because they are testing your limits. They ask about your past, your reactions, your preferences, your fears. They are constructing a mental model. They are probing gently. Each question is a test, and each reflexive answer provides them with handling points. Strategists do the opposite. They understand the probe, and they alter the output. They do not become opaque. They become controlled. Controlled output enables psychological positioning. When you recall only what is beneficial to reveal at the moment you choose to reveal it, you start dictating the terms of interaction instead of reacting to them. This idea is key. Control over your output is control over narrative. When narrative belongs to you, expectation belongs to you. And from expectation comes influence. People do not love influencers because they are understood. They follow influencers because they are unpredictably reliable. That sounds contradictory, but it is not. It means their behavior is stable in principle, but not broadcast in every specific moment. Predictability of principle, unpredictability of reaction, this is a separate category of psychological advantage. Most people confuse consistency with broadcast reaction. If you always feel deeply in front of others, you are consistent in revelation, not in principle. Principles are not emotional reactions. Principles are structural boundaries. Emotional reactions are boundary leaks. Now reflect. Is your communication boundary or emotional leak? If you cannot answer that clearly, you are still releasing internal states as psychological data without strategy. This is where hidden power games occur, in the silent data you broadcast without realizing. Public disagreements, overt manipulation, and obvious coercion are the visible power games, but the unseen ones are far more effective because the player being influenced never notices until after the decision has already been shaped. Now let me tell you a truth few are willing to acknowledge. Power is not about winning arguments. Power is about avoiding traps before you even perceive them. When someone can influence your internal prediction model, your expectation of events, your habitual reactions, they can shape the environment such that your choices feel internal even though they were externally guided. You think you choose, but your landscape was designed. This is hidden psychology, not overt coercion, but covert control, not direct dominance, but indirect direction. It is navigation of context, not enforcement of will. And this is why you must learn to observe without leaking, to evaluate without exposing intention, to respond not because of impulse, but because of choice. Once you practice this, your psychological perimeter becomes stronger. Others cannot easily find levers on you. You become a less predictable individual in a world of predictable patterns. And the less predictable you are, not in chaos, but in controlled variability, the harder you are to influence. Now, this may sound cold. It is. But it is strategic. This is not about removing humanity. This is about protecting autonomy. If you want power games to operate on your terms rather than against you, you must learn to treat human interaction as data exchange with selective revelation, not as emotional truth-telling. And this understanding, hidden, unacknowledged, strategy first, is the first foundation of the psychological game no one warns you about. Most people never realize that power games are happening until long after they've already lost influence. They study tactics, debate logic, and discuss morality, all while unconscious psychological positioning reshapes their choices for them. The reason you felt manipulated in the past was never because someone was louder than you. It was because their behavior revealed fewer psychological variables, while your own patterns were open and predictable. The hidden psychology of power games is not about winning moments. It is about shaping contexts before arguments begin. It is about controlling information flow, not facts. It is about timing, pattern disruption, and strategic silence, not emotional reaction or moral posturing. Once you understand this, countless moments in your life start making sense. Why some negotiations slipped away, why certain interactions drained you, why emotional transparency backfired. It was never personal. It was structural. Power is not taken in confrontation. It is seeded through predictability. No one needs to force your hand when they already know how you will play your cards. The person with influence does not need to be louder, smarter, or morally superior. They only need to be less readable. Because predictability is vulnerability, and unreadability is leverage. Now you know what everyone else overlooked. Behavior is data. Patterns are opportunities. Silence is pressure. Detachment is strategy. If you want influence, you do not fight harder. You reveal less. You wait longer. You control tempo. You observe structure. You anticipate response. Power happens in the gaps others never see, the spaces between thought and reaction, between question and answer, between invitation and exposure. When you master those spaces, you no longer play power games. You shape them. This understanding is not tactical only. It becomes identity. You do not merely react strategically. You are strategic. That is how influence becomes organic instead of forced. And now that you see the hidden psychology no one warns about, you have crossed from being influenced to becoming influential. If this changed how you see human behavior, write this below in the comments. I shape, not react. Subscribe now, because the next video will expose the invisible first moments manipulators use to decide whether you are easy to influence, and how to make sure you are never that person again. Stay aware, stay unreadable, stay strategic.